So today we're going to be talking about the business case for disaster risk reduction. What are the business drivers behind companies, the private sector, getting involved in risk reduction? And this year we've seen a tenfold increase in the private sector getting involved in the global platform. Compared to the last meeting and the one 4 years ago, there's been 10 times more participants coming along. Yesterday, during a roundtable meeting on the private sector, we heard Special Representative Margarita Wallström stressing how vital a role the private sector must play in disaster risk reduction. She said, if we cannot get the private sector with us, we cannot reduce risk. And in the opening session of this event, she said, we're committed to public-private partnerships. We're committed to them at the core of risk reduction. They're there at the center of the HireGo framework. And yet, we've been slow to realize them, to put them into practice. And then we're here today to talk about that gap, to talk about what tools, what practical steps we can take to bridge that gap. And now firstly, looking at the economic case for business to engage. In February this year, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon pointed out that 250,000 people were killed by disasters last year. It was one of the deadliest years on record, and he suggested that this year may prove to be just as costly. And the total economic cost from 2010 was 130 billion. And so far, statistics show us that already by May, this year has proved to be even more costly, the impact being 220 billion so far. And Ban Ki-moon was right. And there'll be some progress, as recorded in the Global Assessment Report this week. But with these sort of statistics, we still have a long way to go. And a few more statistics. And this graph shows the trend over the last 30 years. And from an FM Global survey recently, we heard that the average property loss is 20 times greater for those with weak risk management strategies. And different reports have different amounts depending on their methodology, but between $4 and $7 in response is saved for every $1 that's invested. So the case is compelling for all of us to get involved, but business too. And yet we've had lots of businesses dropping by the Global Hands stand in the marketplace. Do come and visit us this afternoon. And we've had lots of businesses dropping by there and asking, practically, how do we get involved? This increase in participation, they're asking, how do we engage? A few examples. In Indonesia, the Hotel Association has partnered with the tourism industry of the government, the tourism ministry, to develop toolkits for hotels to get ready, tsunami ready. And these toolkits include standard operating procedures, they include fact sheets, information for their staff, and one of the biggest successes has been standardized evacuation signs for routes to evacuation places, standardized across the hotel industry. This is a win for the business, and it's a win for the public sector too. And a second story in the area of the culture of safety. Businesses get involved in raising awareness in the community. This was a company in Japan that funded an NGO project raising awareness through a puppet show that was helping to show principles of risk reduction. And one thing that really brought this home to me was a story following the Japanese tsunami of a gentleman that was responsible for an evacuation. And he got a group of people to safety. And then he heard on the radio that the wave was twice as big as that they'd been preparing that evacuation site for. So he made a split-second decision to re-evacuate people to a higher place, and he saved 60 people's lives as a result of that split-second decision. And he said that that was due to his training in DRR. So companies are getting involved in this, and yet, from our experience in facilitating partnerships between the public and private sectors, we've seen many more companies partnering in disaster response. Perhaps the acronym DRR would be better understood by companies as disaster response and recovery, rather than risk reduction. But we're working with others to try and change that. So we've talked about the compelling case. We talked about that only a few companies are stepping into this space. And on the note of companies stepping in, we wanted to make a plea for case studies. If you are a company partnering in this field, if you have companies you're partnering with, we want to hear from you and tell others about your story. If it's online, we'd love to link across to it. If it's not being written up, but it's happening, come and talk to us, and we'll help you write it up and help get it before a wider audience. So, yeah, moving on to tools. We've got this problem, we've got this gap between, as we talked at the beginning, gap between a call for partnerships, more public-private partnerships, and yet a gap in how we work this out in practice. How do we actually jump that gap into getting partnerships started? And we have a few tools, initiatives that we're working on in partnership with other organizations. Firstly, we're seeking to dialogue. We're seeking to dialogue with you, each of you that are involved in this sector, whether you're a business, whether you're an NGO, involved in partnerships, whether you're a government entity, because this is a topic of such importance to governments. We've heard throughout this week calls for more engagement, and the HIOGO framework at its core describes business as a key stakeholder in disaster risk reduction. So we want to discuss with you to hear how we can move forward. And yeah, we just want to acknowledge this is not the start of the conversation. Although there's a tenfold increase in business getting involved this year, it's not the start, it's an ongoing conversation that others have started before us. Specifically, practically, what are we doing? We're looking to create a brief aimed at CEOs to help them understand other companies that are already involved. Why are they involved? What is it that drives them to be involved? And we're working with other stakeholders. We want to work with you to help consolidate, to crystallize what is the business case for companies to get involved. And it's different for each company. It's different for each industry. We want to try and crystallize what are the core elements of that business case through an online discussion and a roundtable meeting. And we're doing a survey this week looking at what drives companies, what is the key factors for them getting involved, things such as stability in their own company operations, ensuring that they can outride a disaster, continue operating, and similarly stability in their supply chain, ensuring that they can continue operating through their suppliers. Employee safety, retaining top talent is so important these days. Of course, their reputation. One example that came out of our discussions this week that I'd not considered is through existing partnerships with NGOs. If an NGO leads a business towards risk reduction, that's a way that a business could step into this area. Two other tools I want to briefly highlight. One is the Global Hand website, our own website, which is set up to facilitate partnerships between the public and private sectors. We allow businesses to offer how they want to engage, so describe their partnership proposal, and for non-profits to request a proposal. Fill in these forms, and we help you connect together. We also provide inspirational tools, and we want to root these partnerships in best practice. Secondly, as well as the Global Hand website, we have also been working on another initiative that was launched last year, another tool to help bridge the gap, connecting the UN, the United Nations, with the private sector. So business.un.org is a website that companies can go to propose partnerships. And it was through that we first stepped into risk reduction. We were invited to look across the board at how businesses are engaging, because this website now has a strong push for companies to engage in risk reduction. So what next? We have a questionnaire, as I mentioned. come and see us afterwards if you're interested in telling us your views on the private sector. What next? We want to hear from you. What are you doing? What are existing examples in this sector, in these partnerships? And finally, we want to invite you to propose a partnership. You know, we've got a lot of talk this week, and it's good to talk. This is a great place for doing that, getting everyone in the same room. But yeah, we're really about action. We want to get things done. We want to challenge you to ask, what is your part in partnership? How can you make a proposal to engage with others? Thank you very much for your time. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions. How long have we got left? 2 minutes. Any very brief questions from the floor? I'm aware that was a lot of information very quickly. That's the idea of this Ignite stage. Gary? There's a mic coming round.
Okay, thanks, Mike, for your presentation. Well, I understand you're focusing on producing the CEO briefs. But could you just clarify, are you going to produce one master brief template universally, or you seem to also indicate, since businesses differ, will you have tailor-made briefs? Just explain a little more about the brief project. Thank you.
This is something we're doing in partnership with ISDR, and there's currently plans for further publications down the line. So there may be room for things specific to different industries. There's nothing specific planned in that area yet. The initial focus is a business-wide guide. Perhaps one more question? If not, I wondered if I could ask Philip, could you, in a nutshell, sum up what drives you? I know you're very involved in this sector. Is that okay to put you on the spot?
No problem. I'm working with the ISDR. I'm an advisory group member to the ISDR. And our area of concentration is particularly SMEs. I think it's important to point out that no business is too small to be involved in making a contribution to the mitigation of risk in the event of calamity. In fact, I would say that smaller businesses are probably where most of the action is at. Economically speaking, 70% of the global economy comes from the private sector, and over half of that comes from small businesses. Over 90% of employment in the United States comes from small businesses. And when you're looking at small businesses, particularly in disaster-prone locations, you find that the owners and the management team actually live in those disaster-prone. So the space that I'm particularly interested in the work that I'm doing with the ISDR and looking for opportunities to work with Global Hand as well, is in making small business people aware. Small business people have a lot on their plate. Just trying to make payroll is every 2 weeks is a big step for them. So making them aware of disaster resilience, DRR, is important. And then two, presenting that to them as a business opportunity. It's one, important for their business because if you look at Pakistan, 25% of their GDP was loss in the floods that they had. That means 25% of the production capability of businesses cumulatively was lost. I think that looks like a hook. So I better go. So it's important to them for their businesses, but two, there's also capacity that needs to be able to be provided. So there's business opportunities to take care of their business and to create new revenue sources for them.
Thank you for that, Philip. And yeah, we're very keen to get involved with those small businesses and see the guide that I talked about the business case as a tool offered to them and others that are working with them to help show them this is such an important thing to get involved in. And I think by the number of people here, others are also interested in this field. And I'd like to point you all to the Global Hand stand. Number 26 is a meeting point for those interested in public-private partnerships and business engagement. Thank you very much.